time on Shift Points, we modify perfectly brand new parts. Thank you guys for joining. Parking outside, and it was a ton of fun. He started this project. Found a piece of brass he's going to take. All right, everyone. So now that we got the old rotor off the front spindle here, we want to go ahead and just mock up the new brake components here. We want to just put so the bearings that are in that rotor right now, in the old rotor, they were sent to Larry Pollard. They've been tumbled and polished, and they are really, really nice. And so we're going to use those bearings as long as they're the same, which they should be. We want to double check that. We want to use those bearings, so we're going to go ahead and pull those out of the old rotors and get those out. But we're going to mock up these brake components here onto this spindle, probably with the new bearings, just because we're not going to put any grease in them or anything like that. We just want to mock them up, make sure everything's going to bolt up how we want it to, and then just to verify fit, make sure we've got everything we need to while it's still early, while we sell the parts. And if we need to make any changes, we can go ahead and get those made. So right now, we're going to go ahead and start mocking up the new brake components on the front here. So the first thing we're going to do here is install the lug studs. So first off, so we don't have to keep storing them and chance losing them, we're going to go ahead and get them installed onto the hub. Dad's put a little bit of medium strength Loctite on the back sides of these here so that they don't try and back out or do anything crazy. So anyway, we'll get these 5 put in on both hubs, and we'll be ready to put this thing together. So Dad was taking apart the driver's side rotor and hub here, and wanted to show you guys. This was the grease. This is just Kendall SHP, just red grease that was normally, this is what he used to do for packing these. So you can see with that much grease on them that this is going to be a ton of drag on this bearing. So we talked to the guys at DRP whenever we were up at PRI in 2022, and so we were up there at the end of 2022, and we talked to them, and we're going to get some low drag seals from those guys. And the other thing they sell is this low drag grease. And he said for a drag racing application, instead of packing the bearing like this fully, completely full, you can just take a bearing and you can just every third one. He said really the maximum he would do for drag racing is every other bearing. He said, but normally what they do is every third bearing. So that's going to reduce a lot of drag in the bearing using that low drag grease and only doing every third bearing instead of having to, or every third roller instead of having it completely full like that. So that's another change that we're doing here with this new stuff. So Dad's got the hubs together. It looks like the new seals are different than the old ones. I mean, they definitely are. Not that it looks like it, they are different. If you try and put this old seal in this one, it kind of just falls in. But that's okay for what we're going to do to mock this up. We're just going to put the seal in, the old one, and let it be there. And we're not putting any grease in these bearings or anything. Like I said, we're literally just going to bolt all this stuff up, make sure everything fits good. So we already got this one just kind of laying in there, and Dad's going to go stick it onto the strut. I don't know if you guys remember or not, but we talked about it at one point. These struts, they made a design change in 1987. That was the first year of this new style, and it hasn't changed since on this particular strange style strut. And this was built in '87, so we got it just on the design change side of the year. This rotor, all 4 of these rotors are the same. like that. Dad, we noticed after we put the studs in that they're quite a bit too long, looks like. So we wish that we had cut them off, and I'd say at some point that's definitely going to happen. But at least for today, we're going to do it this way. So that rotor is on there, so all that stuff did good. Now we just need to maybe just stick the caliper bracket up here and just make sure everything's good. So there's the caliper bracket on here. This thing came with like a mechanical lock nuts, and so we didn't want to mess those up by mocking this up. So there's just regular 3H24 nuts on there. There's the caliper bracket. Now we got to put the rotor back on, and then at that point we'll be ready to stick the caliper on. And there it is with the caliper on it. We've just got those just snug there, sitting in there. At least it looks really good. It looks cool. These things require spacers in here that will, and they'll go in here and they're going to space this caliper in this direction. So you can see this the rotor needs to be exactly in the center of the caliper, and you can actually see it's a little bit too far this way. So we'll get to all of that whenever we actually do a final assembly on this. But yeah, the mock-up here looks really good. Now, the last thing we want to do is just stick the wheel and tire up here and stick it on and see how that looks too.
Ha! It's like knew what they were doing.
It's like, like it's how it's supposed to be?
Yeah, we've got an inch between the wheel, 3/4 of an inch between the wheel and the caliper. Cool. Everything's slick. It looks good.
Let's stick a couple lug nuts on it and look at it. All right, there it is. Wheel and tire is on. You can see that brake assembly is all together, just hand tight. Like I said, nothing spiked down. Everything clears. We've got good rotation on everything. We've got plenty of clearance on everything, other than just needing to work getting the caliper spaced where it needs to be. All of this is going to work really good. So we weren't crazy. We ordered the right stuff and they sent the right stuff. The other thing is we looked at it and we are okay with this as far as how much thread is sticking through these lug nuts. We're definitely not going to have to pull these off and do anything with it. They're just right.
Well,
so
compared to the wheel wood is placed the wheel out further.
Right. So this the strange combination has the wheel and tire spaced out a little bit further than the wheel wood combo did. So this is all good. Looks really great. So this side is perfect. I won't show you guys the other side because it's exactly the same thing. So now we can dig into the actual stuff that we need to modify on the rear end of this car to be able to get it to bolt up onto the rear end housing how we want it to. Alright, so we've got the axle housing sitting up here on the bench. We got the axle put in place here. The old Willwood caliper mount has this big opening in it, and the reason behind it is you can actually, let's back up, it's here. You can actually take this, slide it over the axle. It holds because this is also the bearing retainer. The caliper mount doubles as the bearing retainer as well. So that goes over this, sets up over the bearing like that, and then the holes line up like this. So that's great because when we bought these axles, they came with the bearings already pressed on them. You can get a set of bearings for somewhere in the neighborhood of $100 to $150 for this, but we really hate to waste these bearings by pulling them off. And the reason we'd have to pull them off is, unlike the Willwood caliper mounts, the strange ones here are solid. So what we're going to do to solve that, we've already got it set up. Dad's already got it set up here in the mill. He's got a jeweler saw here. It's right at 40 thousandths thick. So we're going to take and actually just cut these in two. So our thinking is we can do that, and we're literally not going to lose any surface area here on the actual bearing retainer. So we can go ahead and still use these bearings, because if we take these off, there's no way to get to the inner race to pull them off. So you're actually just gonna kill these bearings when you take them off. They're gonna be completely not usable, untrustable to use. You'd have to buy new ones. So because of the way the Willwood ones are made, and there's a 2-inch slot of nothing on the bearing, we're thinking that if we're gonna lose 80 thousandths of surface area on that bearing, everything should be fine. The other thing that Dad did on these, you could see this hole here is not used whenever you mount these up onto the axle housing. So he has taken, there's a hole here and a hole that's covered up by the vise right now, and he has centered this line up right there between these two holes and between these two holes to make sure he has the full surface area from here to here the same on both sides. So this is centered up in that, not on this slot, not on the bearing retainer slot, but between the two holes to make sure that everything is going to bolt up the same, whether it's in two pieces or in one piece, how it is now. So he's going to crank out the mill. You can see he's already got the light on here, and we're going to go ahead and start making our cuts and get these things cut apart. That was working really well up until the time that it wasn't. So what happened is in the vise here, when everything was clamped up, the way everything was set, if we run this guy down, if we run the head of this down, this column right there was actually going to start hitting the caliper mount before it would actually cut all the way through it. So we checked all the different saws and stuff that we had, even this big aggressive one here. It's this distance here hits the vise before it would get down where it needed to cut. Blah, blah, blah. Looked everywhere. So basically what we decided was we would, we took some bolts, bolted this together. So these two are bolted together. And now Dad's going to use this line that he already has as reference. We're going to put it in the bandsaw here and cut it. I mean, that's all we can do, you know. This is just one of them things. You try and do things like as precise as you can, and then you just kind of run out of the ability to do it sometimes. So here we go. We use this saw blade lube, and we run it on each side of the bandsaw blade. We do that pretty often, especially if we're going to cut something pretty thick. Here goes it. It's the Lennox lube tube. So anyway, we do that. It lubricates, puts some wax on that blade. It makes it way easier to cut. It kind of keeps everything lubricated, especially if you're going to cut something thick like we're about to with this guy. There you go. Well, that worked really well.
Or should have done it to begin
Probably
with.
should have. It took a lot less time.
But it did have a good straight line to go by.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Now we have 2-piece caliper mount brackets. Alright, we went ahead and put this on there. You can kind of see why we did it. So we got a small gap here on this side, another small gap there on this side, but this allows us to take this off. You can take the axle out if you need to, or whatever you need to do there, and then you can put this back on at the same time and not have to worry about pulling that bearing. So in the future it wouldn't really matter, but this is a brand new set of bearings. We hated to waste them just to pull them off and put new ones on. So here we go. So that right there is going to do us well. We can bolt this up. Caliper will mount here, rotor will go on here, or the rotor will go on here, then the caliper will mount up on everything, and that's going to do exactly what we want it to. And we have the other side cut as well, so that'll work the same over there on that side. It's going to be just perfect. Just simplifies things a little bit for us on this first go around without really changing anything, because we've got all the surface area on the bearing still. 2 bolts on each one of these. That's going to clamp that in. That's going to do exactly what we want it to. All right, guys, that's going to basically wrap us up this week. We wanted to make sure all the brake parts that we had ordered were going to fit. Everything was, we wanted to get everything mocked up just to make sure, you know how this stuff goes, man. You try and order and you try and do the best you can. through sometimes no fault of your own, sometimes it is your fault, you can kind of end up with the wrong stuff. And this was making sure that all of this was going to work how we wanted it to, and it did perfectly. All of this strange stuff bolted right up. We did do some modification, of course, but that was for our own use, not really for anybody else. If you didn't have those bearings on that axle, you could have used those mounting brackets exactly how they were. They would have bolted right up perfectly. So that was a pretty big job this week, getting all this taken care of. We wanted to show it off. We wanted to kind of show off the parts for ourselves. So thank you guys so much for joining. Hit that subscribe button if you like this, if you learned something. And make sure to follow us on social media. Do all that stuff. We have a good time doing this. And the more people that follow along, the more chances are that we're going to be making more of these videos as we go. So thank you guys so much. We'll see you next week.